I hate making decisions. Hello everyone! So if you're new here on the channel, I just wanted to let you know very quickly what I do here, which is I sew things. Not very original, I know. But I really like taking historically inspired clothes and making them wearable for my body and my everyday, which is not a historical life and not a historical body. So we try to make it work. I do a couple of things where I try to adapt styles to fit modern day life, and that today's video is that exactly. So in the spirit of my recent 1890s potato coat, I wanted some more adjustable pieces in my wardrobe, because something I really love about historical lines is they're clean and structured lines, but that's the issue, they're very defined, and so as soon as something doesn't conform to it, it kind of goes a bit wrong. So one of my favorite things to make is skirts. I love making skirts, I love wearing skirts. However, skirts, especially historical ones, that are made in a historical way have very specific purposes. So for example, one of the features of a historical skirt, in this case like a late 19th century skirt, is that it has a very thin waistband, and the purpose of this is to reduce bulk at the waist, because the emphasis of that silhouette is the waist. This is typically fine because you're wearing a corset, so the weight of the skirt will then be supported by the corset, and the tightness of the skirt won't disturb your body because it's worn over a corset. Modern day life, you can wear a corset every day if you want to. I don't, and especially if I'm traveling or if I'm going out for a very long time, I typically don't, just because I don't know what the day will bring me, and I'm afraid of anything happening that, you know, might ruin my clothes or might ruin my corset, or there's layers and layers of anxieties. But my point here is that there are ways, I think, that you can turn these clothes to fit you. I don't think the clothes should ever be, you should ever try to fit the clothes should fit you. They're clothes. So I'm going to be trying to make two skirts in historical styles that are adjustable. By adjustable, I mean that you can take them in or let them out a certain amount for a range of different days, you know? Sometimes you might want a little bit more slack in your waistband, and some days you might not. And I want to have skirts that can do that. So my original plan was to make a sort of 1890s skirt with sort of a pleated back, and make that adjustable with a different set of buttons. We'll get to it a bit later. And then to make an Edwardian skirt that had sort of a drop front kind of style. That was my original plan. I have two fabrics that I bought to make these skirts, but I was talking to a friend about it, and then she reminded me of the 18th century skirt. And in case you're new to the 18th century skirt is basically one half over your back and one half over your front, and then you've got two sets of ties, and that's it. It's a great design. I've made a couple of 18th century skirts before, so I think maybe an 18th century skirt with a waistband could be quite cute. My purpose with this is to make wearable skirts, and I'm going to show you my designs. So originally this is what I had thought for the 1890s skirt. I think I'm going to stick pretty close to this because I really like it, and I think the design lines are very simple. It's going to have a little pointed waistband because I think that's really cute and really helps emphasize your waist in without any gimmicks, and it'll have a sort of facing at the bottom cut on the bias just for a little bit of contrast. I think it'll be a really nice versatile skirt. And then this is my design for the other skirt, and this was the Edwardian style that I was talking to you about. This is very historical based. This was based on a couple of fashion plates that I saw, and I really like it as a design. But now that I'm thinking about it in terms of everyday versatility, I'm more likely to wear a plain skirt than I am to wear a decorated skirt just for everyday life. So this skirt would work really well for a full Edwardian outfit, but probably not if I just want to throw a skirt on to go to the shops to buy some milk. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of leaning towards the 18th century skirt now, which is not at all what I planned when I sat down to film this. But I guess my plan for this will be I'll start with the 1890s skirt, and by the time I finish that, I can decide where to go for the Edwardian or the 18th century skirt for the other fabric. It makes more sense to have an 18th century skirt because it's an entirely different skirt, while these two are quite similar in their shape. I hate making decisions. Okay, so here are my fabrics. This is the fabric for the 1890s skirt. It's a mixed wool suiting in this beautiful sort of autumn toned check. I love it. I actually bought these fabrics originally in the autumn, and it was meant to be an autumn project, but I ran out of time, so I'm doing them in the spring. And then the other fabric is this, a very plain mustard yellow linen. It's that's it. There's nothing else about it. I really like it. As you know, I'm a big mustard yellow fan. And I actually have a mustard yellow pleated skirt that I love but doesn't fit me anymore. So this would be kind of the project to replace that. And so if I really want to replace that, it makes sense to make another pleated skirt. So I think I've talked myself into making an 18th century skirt. So we'll see how that goes. But let's start with the 1890s skirt. So for the 1890s skirt, I think I'm just going to use my very typical pattern of the Keystone pattern. This is something I drafted a few years ago. I've made 2 of these skirts before. I really like them. I might make some slight alterations. So I just literally had to stop filming to go and look at one of my old videos because I was trying to remember which pattern I wanted to use for this skirt, for this one. That's meant to be like an 1890s / turn of the century skirt. And I've done a lot of these before, and the last ones I did, particularly that came to mind, was this video where I compared this butterick pattern, which is meant to be like an Edwardian, like early Edwardian inspired skirt set. And I compared it to an actually drafted Edwardian skirt from one of my drafting books called The Voice of Fashion. I'd completely forgotten that was the case. I thought I'd use my Keystone pattern for the other skirt in that. So obviously my memory is terrible. But basically, I have 3 patterns I can pick from. I could draft a new one. I don't think I need to. All 3 of these patterns are great, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I've got 3 patterns to pick from. I've got this one, which is a butterick pattern, but in that video I did compare it to a historical pattern, and the differences aren't that many, so it's surprisingly okay. And then I have an actual Edwardian drafted pattern from a skirt. I'll insert a photo here if I can find one of me wearing that skirt. And then I have my 1890s Keystone drafted pattern. I'll also insert a photo here. There's a video on the channel about that one. I need to pick a pattern. My plan today was to cut out at least one skirt, but I've now sat down to talk to you about it, and my plan for this project has completely fallen apart. I don't know which style to pick or which pattern to pick. So I think I'm going to need to just make a decision. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to find a photo of each of these skirts that I've made, and I'm going to look at them all together, and I'm going to pick one. That's a good plan. So you know how I was like, oh, I'll just look for the photos to pick a pattern, and I couldn't find one of them in photos because turns out I've never actually taken a photo of it, which means I've probably never worn it much. I think I've worn it once or twice, which is not a good indication. But then I realized I own these skirts. I can just try them on. So we're going to try them on really quickly just to pick a pattern. Come on, let's do this. Okay, so here we have the Keystone. So I think it would be a little bit shorter than this. I don't typically wear very long skirts simply because I don't like the idea of them hitting the ground. Also, it's quite detrimental to them. They'll wear out way faster, you'll wear out the fabric, and you might damage it more easily. So I usually do my skirts about lower calf, like right about, oh, you can't see. Hang on a second. Like this, maybe? So this is the Keystone. I usually do my skirts about calf length, so like about there. This is what it looks like. This is the 1890s Keystone with a very simple petticoat underneath. I don't want to have to wear anything else because I'm very lazy, so I probably won't. This is it. I like it, but I think it's not my favourite, I'll admit. Okay, next one. Okay, so this is the Edwardian that was drafted for that video I mentioned. This is based on authentic drafting instructions from, I think it was May 1904. It's a cute skirt. Immediately I think I prefer this to the other one. I don't know if it's because it's shorter so it looks like it's more flared. But I'm not a big fan of the way I've been doing fan pleats or the way they sit. So I might be doing a different arrangement here. It might just be because I didn't do up the placket. I think immediately I prefer this to the Keystone. What do you guys think? Yeah. Okay, let's look at the last one. Okay, so last one. This is the Edwardian pattern, the butterick Edwardian pattern. You can see it has a lot more volume at the hem, I think, which I find very attractive, of course. But also this skirt is a lot heavier than the other ones because it had some dubious construction methods. I don't know, I think this pattern just has my heart. But it's, I think, a much modern, because you can see the way it lays, it's more like it has so much volume that it has some circle skirt reminiscence. So maybe I'll meet in the middle and I'll go for the historical 1904 pattern, because it is quite nice. Yes, let's do this. We gotta cut out a skirt today. Okay, so we have progress. I have done all the main assembly of the skirt. This means I've done all the seams, and I did decide to finish them by machine simply because this isn't meant to be a super historical skirt. This is like historical silhouettes and some methods. And also they had machines in the 1890s. There's top stitching that you can see in some clothes, especially those that were mass produced. I'm not a fancy elite woman. I don't need hand finished seams. So I've just done them all by machine, and I'm really proud of this, but I left a gap for the pocket. Look at it. In the right panel, imagine. And I've also assembled my pocket. It's a little bit wonky because I cut it out of on a bias because I wanted to use scraps. So here we are. So the next few steps, now that all my seams are assembled and finished, is to work on the flounce. So I decided I'm going to add about a 5-inch flounce to the bottom of this, and it's going to be cut on the bias for some interest. I quite like that, and it was something that was used when you've got like self or skirts that are made of all the same fabric. It's a really nice way to add some interest. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut out my flounce, and you might notice that I didn't add any interlining to this skirt whatsoever. I could have, it probably would have made it stand out more, but for my day-to-day, I much prefer sort of flowy skirts rather than structured skirts. I find that it meshes with modern aesthetics a bit better. I feel more comfortable in them. And so that's what I've decided to do. I didn't want to have to buy additional fabric, so I can just use things from my stash. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a strip of linen, just from my stash, as wide as the facing, oh my god, my words. As wide as the flounces I'm going to add to the bottom. I'm also going to cut a strip of linen, probably on the bias if I can manage it. And then I'm going to sew those together at the hem, and then I'm going to sew it to this. And then I'm going to finish those seams, do up the back seam, slap a placket on it and a waistband, and it should be done. I'll have to figure out the pleats at the back and how to make it adjustable. I have kind of an idea about buttons and the waistband, so let's get to that. I am tackling this hem, and this is something that I quite like to do. I've done it in a couple of skirts before, which is where I do sort of a hem interfacing or interlining, and the facing, or in this case the bottom flounce, all in one go. So the way this is going to go is I cut both of these on the bias, and then I connected them. You can see a little seam right here. I did try to match it. It's okay. So I'm just going to sew the linen to the wool, right sides together, with the seam allowance here, and then I'm going to press that open, understitch it, and maybe add some cording to it. I found that adds a little bit of flair to skirts that I quite liked. And then I need to level the hem of the actual skirt before I add this on. But I quite like this. It adds a bit of body to the hem of the skirt without adding a lot of weight or bulk to the rest of it. So I'm hoping it works. I'm not too confident because of the weight of the wool, but we'll see. Time to sew. Okay, so the skirt is nearly done, and I know it doesn't look like much, but I swear it is. So I finished off a few things by putting in the pocket, and then I pleated up the back and I basted it, and then I also evened out the hem, and I did this by sitting on the floor and measuring up. But I first found what was the shortest point of the skirt. So it's really important to level out the hem if you're adding a flounce that's already hemmed, which mine is, because obviously some of it, the curved hem is cut on the bias, some of the panels are cut on the bias, which means they can stretch when they're hanging. So it's just really nice to even it all out. And now I'm just going to finish prepping my flounce, and then I'll add it in. Then it just needs a waistband and closures. Super quick, right? So it's been a few nights, and I just wanted to talk to you very quickly about the closure, because I've had to redo this closure about 3 times, I think, maybe 2 to 3 times. Originally my plan was to have something that extended and met in the middle that you could then overlap and pull closer or looser. However, obviously the whole weight of the skirt like this is in this big section that's pleated at the back, and that really wasn't secure enough. So I tried a couple of different things where I bound the back edge, and then I had 2 things that extended. That didn't work very well. So I think I've settled on this. I've had to just redo it again because I think the trick to this is to make the skirt too big so that you can then tighten it. So I think that's the trick. However, I did make it too big. Oh my god. I did make it too big, so I undid the waistband to do an extra pleat on either side to take it in a little bit. And I tried it on and I think this will work. So I think the issue when you, this is the actual closure is here. And this means you've got some flexibility because you can, what I'm going to do is, these are fake buttons and they'll just be hooks and eyes so that you can pull this a bit tighter. But by doing it on both sides, I think this disguises this back closure a bit more, because I've done this in skirts before where all I did was I'd have the center back closure and then I'd add an additional button and this overlap would tighten, but that looked a bit messy, and I think this works quite well. So all I have left to do really is to top stitch this back into place. Then I need to add one more button on this side for symmetry, I guess. And then I need to do the little eyes for the hooks on both sides of the tabs. And that's it for this skirt. We'll see how it works out. Okay, so I do have some skirts to show you, and I'm going to show you the skirts in the order that I made them because I think that makes the most sense. Now, as I've put it on, I've realised this isn't the best shirt to really show it off, but I was hoping to wear a shirt that would work for both skirts, and here we are. So this is skirt number 1. I will change the angle so you can see it full length in a second. But I'm quite happy with it. It is definitely adjustable. I think it's super cute. It's super comfortable. And one of my favourite things about it is that it's super light because I kept taking the linings on it. Very few. So it's just basically the hem facing. And that just adds a little bit of swoosh to the hem without like making the skirt very heavy. So I'm actually really happy with this. And it does have a pocket as necessary. It has this little accent on the waistband, which I think isn't super noticeable, but adds a little bit of extra juice. And then at the back, it's got like the little buttons and the pleats, and it's got like a good swoosh to it. And then I actually thought I might look cute with this vest. This is just a thrifted vest that I got, and I tailored it slightly by adding 2 darts to the shaped, but by taking in the shaped front seams into like more of 2 dots. If this vest doesn't work for this skirt, I think it will 100% work for the next one. So that's kind of like what I was thinking, was trying to find an outfit that would work for both of them. Well, I also have a waistcoat in a different fabric that might look nice with this, but yeah, I think it's got possibilities. So let's look at the next skirt.